Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome today to what is the final live stream here on the channel in 2024, and it is, of course, to review the 2024 Formula One season, which finished about this time last week in terms of the timing, not just the day. Yeah, what a season we had. Didn't start off great. We thought we were going to get another dominant year from Red Bull, a boring year like we had in 2023, but it turned into the most exciting season we've had, definitely since 2021, and the most exciting of the ground effect years. So yeah, was a great season, many great stories, many different race winners. We had how many different race winners? I think it was it 7 different race winners this year? Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Piastri, Russell, Hamilton. Yeah. So, when you compare that to 2023, we only had 3 race winners that year, which was Verstappen, Perez, and Sainz. So, yeah, very exciting season. And in this video or in this live stream, which should be going on for no more than 2 hours, I know in 2 hours from now there's a big football match on which I don't want to clash with at 4:30 p.m. my time, UK time, which again is in about 2 hours from now. So we're probably going to be live for say the next hour and 45, hour and 50 minutes. And what we're going to go through is first off the championship standings, have a look at those final standings. We'll also go through the teams and individually just go through how they performed, how I thought they got on, and whether they could have done better in in 2024 and where they may have gone wrong. We'll get into that. And then in the I'd say second half of this stream, I'm going to play a video which I finished last night, and it is my driver rankings for 2024 video, which the actual video itself that I said a few days ago was going to be separately uploaded onto the channel. That is still going to happen. This driver rankings video will be uploaded later tonight onto the channel. I've just got to make a thumbnail for it. So that's why it's not uploaded on the channel yet. But I will play the video in this stream. It is quite long. It is just under an hour long. But yeah, it is my driver rankings from 24th all the way to 1st. And you guys can obviously watch that and see who I went for. And, let me know whether you agree or disagree with certain rankings. And then at the end of the stream, obviously I'll read some comments out as we go along. But at the end of the stream, we're going to get into what the best race of 2024 was. And there is a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys, what was the best race of 2024? And your options are the Canadian Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. For me, those are the 4 best races of the year. Let me know between now and the end of the stream what the best race in your view was of 2024. And what we'll do is when we come to the very end of the stream, I will finish the results of that poll and we'll see who you voted for as the best race. Of course, I'll give my view on what I think was the best race, and I'll probably give my top 5. But yeah, that's what I want to hear from you guys in that poll. Is what is your best race of the season? And yeah, we'll see what you guys vote for. But yeah, that's the plan. Like I said, we're going to go through the teams, how they performed. Then we'll get into the driver rankings, and I'll play that video, which I said is almost an hour long, but it'll keep you guys entertained for sure. And then just after that, for a few minutes, we'll go through again the best race of the season and finish that poll and see what you guys have had to say. As I go though, make sure to comment in the live chat what you thought of certain drivers' performances in 2024, what you thought of the team's performances in 2024, and when we get into the driver ranking stuff, feel free to comment as I go along in that video whether you agree or disagree with my rankings and what you would have gone for your top 5 or top 10. You can, let me know when that plays. Obviously, I will let you know when we get into that particular part of the of the live stream. So yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. And also, probably before the driver rankings video, I will before that driver rankings part of the stream, I will also do a quick channel update in terms of what the plan is after today's stream, because obviously this stream happening now will, be finished in a couple hours, and then later I'll upload that driver rankings video. But then after that, obviously there is no confirmed plan as to what content is coming after that, but I will get into that with you guys in a bit. But I think what we're going to do to start is go through the championship standings, and we'll go through the entire Drivers' Championship, not just the top 10. Max Verstappen, of course, the Drivers' World Champion for 2024, ending up, 63 points clear of Lando Norris, I think it was, in the end. Clearly the best driver of the season, and yeah, Max fully deserving to win the championship, picking up, I think, was it 9 race wins in 2024, when I think the next highest in terms of race wins was I think might have been Lando Norris on 4 wins for the year. So yeah, Verstappen clearly deserving. Lando Norris second, Charles Leclerc third, Oscar Piastri just about held on to fourth ahead of Carlos Sainz in fifth. George Russell 6th, Lewis Hamilton 7th, Perez 8th, Alonso 9th, and Pierre Gasly, because of his 7th place in the final Grand Prix, snuck ahead of Nico Hülkenberg to finish in 10th position. So, yeah, fantastic there from Gasly. What an end to the season he had. And then the bottom half of the championship, Hülkenberg just a point behind in 11th, Tsunoda 12th, and then Stroll 13th, Ocon 14th, and then Magnussen 15th, Albon 16th, Ricciardo 17th. Oliver Behrman only did 3 races in the year, yet finished ahead of, 5 or 6 drivers. Oliver Behrman 18th, he finished in the championship. Of course, he'll make his full-time debut next season in Melbourne. Franco Colapinto 19th, Zhou Guanyu then in 20th. And then the bottom 4, 21st, Liam Lawson. He's the final driver in the championship to have scored points. And then the bottom 3 obviously didn't score points. Valtteri Bottas, Logan Sargent, and Jack Doohan, of course, only did 1 Grand Prix, which was the final Grand Prix in Yas Marina. So, those are the 24 drivers. And I think that's the first time we've had 24 drivers compete in a championship, maybe since we had 24 cars on the grid in 2012. Quite a lot of replacement drivers over the course of the year. Obviously, Behrman came in and did a couple races for Haas and 1 for Ferrari. Colapinto came in for a few races. Lawson came in for a few races to replace Ricciardo. We had quite a few little replacements in there over the course of the year. And on the constructors' side, McLaren champions by 14 points. Ignore the amount of points McLaren scored for the season. When I saw that, it definitely made my heart skip a beat. So yeah, McLaren 14 points clear of Ferrari in the end. Red Bull finishing in 3rd. Mercedes in 4th. Aston Martin then in 5th with Alpine 6th. Brilliant comeback from Alpine in the championship, because during that 4-week break in between the Singapore and US Grand Prix, Alpine were, I'm pretty sure they were 9th in the championship and looked like they maybe could get 8th, but that would be the absolute best realistically they could get, but they ended up 6th. So yeah, brilliant second, I won't say second half of the season, but a brilliant final, 6 races of the year. Haas in 7th, Racing Bulls 8th, Williams in 9th, and Sauber thankfully did score points. I was worried they weren't going to get any by the end of the season, but they did just about, with Zhou Guanyu, get a points finish. But yeah, horrible season for the Green Mean Machine. But yeah, that's how it finished in the championships in 2024. It was quite a bit different from what we predicted. I can't remember exactly what I predicted, but I do know I predicted Red Bull and Max Verstappen to win both championships. Of course, I was wrong on the constructors side. I think almost everyone was wrong. If I go back to the constructors, I think everyone almost was wrong with the constructors championship prediction, because we all assumed Red Bull would be not as dominant as last year, but would still end up winning probably 15, 16 races of the, what was it, 24 we had. And in the end, they only ended up winning 9 races, which is still quite a few, but is only what? That's, I think, 1/3 of the season that they ended up winning. Which again is quite a bit different to 2023, where they won, what was it, 22 of 23 races, I think it was. And yeah, nobody predicted McLaren to win the championship. I thought we all thought McLaren would have probably a good season and probably would finish, say, top 3 in the championship, which obviously was going to be higher than where they finished last year. Last year, of course, they finished in 4th. Maybe, there were some people that maybe thought McLaren could finish ahead of Ferrari for 2nd, but again, 1st place in the championship, we all assumed it would be Red Bull, but it proved not to be. And having a proper close constructors championship battle between 2 teams that have not even been really close to winning the constructors championship for quite a while was a very welcome surprise in 2024. Yeah, Red Bull, of course, we didn't expect them to finish in 3rd. Mercedes, I don't think where they finished was necessarily a surprise given where they were at the start of the season. But obviously, coming into the season, we thought Mercedes were potentially going to be, the 2nd best team after Red Bull. And that just wasn't the case, even though they did end up picking still a few race wins over the year. I think 4 race wins it was, which is still quite good, considering, again, where they were in those first, what was it, 7 or 8 races, where they were basically an upper midfield team. And then Aston Martin 5th. I don't think that's really any different from what many of us predicted. I think we were all hopeful that the poor development would not happen again, but it did. But in terms of where they finished in the championship, I don't think many of us really predicted any different. Alpine 6th. Obviously, at the start of the year, Alpine were very slow, had probably just about the worst car on the grid in Bahrain at the start of March, but yeah, ended up finishing in 6th because they really did turn that car around in the second half of the year. And with Alpine, yeah, I don't think anyone predicted them after the start of the season to be top 6 in the championship. We all thought they'd be 9th, probably at the very best. Which, again, until that US Grand Prix in Austin, where they turned up with a much faster car, that's where they were. So it was just, yeah, an incredible turn of form in those final 6 races of the year, which is what turned Alpine's season around. Haas were surprisingly, I think, quite a bit better this year than we all thought, especially after replacing Gunter Steiner as team principal with Ao Komatsu, who did a fantastic job, I have to say. Komatsu, definitely one of the contenders for team principal of the year, in my opinion. I wouldn't say the team principal of the year. I'd say Andrea Stella would have to win that. But Komatsu absolutely should be, I'd say, in the top 3 for team boss of the year. And yeah, they turned around their form in the races. They actually have a good car on a Sunday now, rather than just being quick on Saturday, which is encouraging going forward for them. Racing Bulls 8th, definitely disappointing. We all thought Racing Bulls would be probably, if you look below Aston Martin, I think we all expected Racing Bulls to be best of the bottom half of the field. And they never really were. There was the odd, there was some races here and there where they were, but it just wasn't consistent at all. And I think really they are one team where it's not really being talked about a lot, but I honestly think they've had a disappointing 2024. Williams ninth, not a great year, but Williams not able to maintain, unfortunately, the speed of last season, 2023. And that's why they ended up dropping in the championship. They just didn't have as good of a car this year. And then Sauber last, and Sauber, I mean, I think I predicted Sauber to finish 7th in the championship, which shows how much I know. Because, yeah, couldn't be further from being correct. But, yeah, Sauber were absolutely terrible. I did not think, though, this season would be quite as bad for them as it was. I mean, we knew at the start of the year that, yeah, things were not good. But for them to be so consistently terrible for as long as they were was quite surprising. Because even though last year they weren't that great, they still delivered some weekends where they were really quick in 2023. Remember that weekend where they locked out the third row of the grid, for example, in Hungary? So there was still the odd race where they were, really quick, and there was some potential in that car. But this year, they never really found it until the final couple races where they brought a couple upgrades and they actually improved the car to the point where they could actually fight, not necessarily for points, but for the positions just outside of the points. So hopefully they can carry that momentum into next year. But yeah, Sauber just not good enough. And hopefully next year they can at least be, even if they're last in the championship, hopefully they can at least be closer to, say, the front of the midfield in points and pace than they were this year. Because, Audi want to be taking over a team that isn't just a complete horror show. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. By the way, before I move on to talking about the teams in a bit more depth, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. Let's try and get these likes up, over 10 likes if we can. That'd be great if we could do that. But anyway, let's go on to the teams individually and some key stats regarding their seasons. So Red Bull, of course, Max Verstappen this year wins his 4th consecutive World Championship. Something we all knew would happen, but it happened quite differently from how we expected. And Max, no doubt, had to work for it. And at the end of the day, delivered when his championship rivals could not. So, yeah, massive congratulations to Max Verstappen. Thoroughly deserving of winning the World Championship, especially in a car that was not the quickest over the course of the season. Yes, in the first, say, 8, 9 races of the year, I think you could say the Red Bull was the best car. But after that, I don't think you could say that. I think the McLaren and the Ferrari in certain races were quicker than Red Bull after that point. So, yeah, Max proving just how amazing he is in 2024. But whilst it was successful for Max on the driver's side, it was not for Red Bull as a team. Red Bull failed to win the Constructors' Championship, and that was their first year without winning the Constructors' Championship since 2021, where, of course, they finished second to Mercedes. Obviously, that year they were a bit closer in the end. But, yeah, we all know the reason why. It is all down to not really having a driver in that second car performing at even a decent level. That's why they've ended up not winning the Constructors' Championship. Because I think, honestly, with the way they started the year, if Perez had performed all year at his best level, I think they still would have won the Constructors' Championship, because they still had a good car through the year, and the car was definitely good enough, much of the time to be having both cars on the podium. But Perez, really, after those first 6 races where he actually started the year well, after then was nowhere. And that's why Red Bull did not win the Constructors' Championship. And it's also the first time Red Bull have finished third in the Constructors since 2019. 5 years they've been in the top 2 of the championship, and now they're back outside of it. Maybe next year that'll benefit them in terms of development, but they will be very disappointed not to have won the Constructors' Championship when it absolutely was there to be won if, again, they actually had 2 capable drivers in their team rather than just one. So, yeah, Red Bull definitely will come away a bit disappointed with the year, because even despite the drop-off in pace they had, they still could have taken both championships, especially with how McLaren weren't quite performing on race day every single week. McLaren, I mean, almost left the door open for Ferrari to win the championship in the end. So Red Bull, again, absolutely could have done it if they had 2 capable drivers in there. McLaren, obviously, your Constructors' champions, and they win their first Constructors' championship in 26 years. 1998. The year I was born. That's the last time they won the championship before last week. And then last week happened. Congratulations to them. What a turnaround from McLaren. And also 6 race wins in 2024, meaning that 2024 is the first multi-win season for McLaren since 2012, where in 2012 they took... how many race wins did they take in 2012? 3, 4, 5. I think 7 wins they took in 2012. So, yeah, the first multi-win season since then. And they deserve to win the Constructors. They had, I think, the best driver lineup on the grid in terms of quality. And they had the best car also through the year. And if you have the best car over the course of a season, you should be winning the Constructors' Championship. No doubt about it. And McLaren delivered that on the team side. When it comes to the driver's side, of course, that's a completely different topic, which we'll get into later. But yeah, on the Constructors' side, McLaren delivered. Even though they didn't make it easy for themselves, final couple races, they did give away a lot of points to Ferrari, and Ferrari did get a bit too close for comfort. But in the end, McLaren still ended up winning the Constructors because, again, they had the better car over the year, and that's why they got the job done. Obviously, took more race wins than Ferrari as well in 2024, and really that win that Norris got in Abu Dhabi, that's what separated McLaren and Ferrari for the season, because they were locked on the same amount of wins going into that final Grand Prix. So yeah, congratulations to McLaren, great season. And for next year, there's no reason why they can't win both championships, but they are going to be pretty strong again in trying to win that Constructors title, no doubt about it. Ferrari finishing second and just 14 points from first place. That is the closest Ferrari has come to winning the Constructors since 2008. And clearly, Fred Vasseur, the new team boss at Ferrari, obviously he just completed his second full season at the team. I think by now it's clearly proven to anyone who may have been doubting him that he is clearly the man to take Ferrari forward, because he's come the closest to, winning a Constructors' Championship for Ferrari. He's come closer than, Domenicali did, Arriva Bene, Binotto, and produced, I think, a very good season considering the circumstances of the season and how, Ferrari really did dip in the middle of the season. I mean, none of us thought around, say the start of July, where Ferrari were very slow compared to, say, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull. None of us expected Ferrari to be fighting for the Constructors' Championship. We all thought they were done for the year because the age-old issue had happened where they failed to bring developments that improved the car, but then ended up proving us wrong. They ended up improving the car, with some upgrades and finding a better technical solution for their car going forward. And that's why they were so good in the second half of the season. And yeah, after the summer break, they ended up picking up, what was it, 3 race wins, 5 in total for the year, as you can see, 5 wins in 2024. But 3 of them, yeah, came after the summer break. Obviously, Monza, Austin, and Mexico were the tracks where that occurred for the Scuderia. But yeah, Ferrari, even though they didn't win the championship, undoubtedly they are heading in the right direction. And next year, I do not see why they can't be, maybe not winning the championship, but on both fronts, at least very close to winning both championships. I don't see why that can't happen next year. They've got a good car now. Obviously, next year, going to have 2 top drivers in their car. And in terms of the performance of the team, trackside, operationally, they are the best they've been in a long time. And, 2025, without a doubt, is a massive opportunity for Ferrari. Because you never know what's going to happen in 2026. Ferrari might not have a good engine and might be miles off the pace in 2026. So 2025 might be the chance for Ferrari between now and the end of this decade for them to win a championship. And definitely the opportunity is there. As long as they just keep improving on what they had at the end of 2024, then there's no reason, again, why they can't be right there for the championship next year. So, yeah, good season for Ferrari and heading absolutely in the right direction. For Mercedes, though, not heading in the right direction. Mercedes this year finished 4th in the constructors for the first time since 2011. Every year since 2011 up until this year, they finished, or not every year, let's say no, it was not since 2012, since 2013, sorry, until 2023, every single year they finished in the top 3 of the championship. Obviously, most years winning the championship. But this year was the first year since 2011 they finished in 4th. Of course, in 2012, they finished 5th. So, yeah, they've basically gone back to where they were at the start of their project. Mercedes, though, did take, despite starting the year poorly and having still an inconsistent car, still took 4 race wins in 2024. Lewis Hamilton, though, the 7-time champion, finished 7th in the championship, which is the worst finish of his career. He has never finished that low in the championship before. And yeah, disappointing season for him, which we'll get on to later. But yeah, Mercedes, the reason they finished 4th in the championship is because of how they started the season. If they, let me just readjust my chair quickly. There you go. Yeah, if Mercedes had started the year with the car they had in Montreal, where they were, fighting for the win, if they had started the year with that car, there's no reason why Mercedes couldn't have been fighting for the championship, because Mercedes were only, what was it, like 110 points or something behind Red Bull at the end of the season. And obviously, after, what was it, 8 races or so, the gap was already well over 100 points between Red Bull and Mercedes, just after those few races at the start of the year. So if they had started the year with the car that maybe they finished the year with, you could say, or, like I said, had from, say, the Canadian Grand Prix on, Mercedes would have been in the championship fight, no doubt about it. But they started the year with a car that was pretty much a second a lap off the pace of the absolute front-running pace. And you cannot tolerate that if you're a, Mercedes employee. That cannot be accepted. This is, Mercedes-Benz, a team that was dominating for years in Formula One, and now they are, even though they've won races this year, they're at their lowest point now than they've been probably in, about 12, 13 years. maybe in 2026 with the new power unit regulations, maybe that will be the turnaround they need to get back to winning championships. But yeah, Mercedes just, yeah, very disappointing season. And honestly, for next year, I don't have really that high expectations. They will win races next year, but they will not be championship contenders next year because they still have too inconsistent of a car, which is something they've had really for the last couple years, not just this year. So yeah, Mercedes very disappointing, and we'll see what happens next year. But really, I think Mercedes' main focus is 2026 because rumor has it the Mercedes power unit is performing very well in the tests they're doing for the new power units for that season. And if that's true, and if we get to that season and Mercedes clearly have the most powerful engine, then great for them. But until then, we will have to see, what Mercedes get up to. But yeah, very disappointing season, especially considering how, last year finished second in the championship ahead of Ferrari, ahead of McLaren. Yeah, they didn't win a race, but they were very consistent in, being right up there in the top 3 or 4. And as a team, we thought were probably the second best to Red Bull and were maybe the closest to being able to challenging Red Bull for the championship. And of course, this season that proved not to be the case. So yeah, we'll see what happens next year. But next year, I don't think is really going to be that big of a year for Mercedes. Now let's go on to the midfield teams. Aston Martin finishing in 5th for the second year, running 0 podiums for the team in 2024, and finished only 29 points clear of Alpine. And the reason I put that in this graphic is because in Bahrain, Aston Martin, yeah, they didn't have a car that was, able to be on the podium or anything, but compared to Alpine, they were lapping the Alpine. The Alpine was that slow compared to the Aston Martin. Yet at the end of the season, Alpine were faster than Aston Martin by probably 2-3 tenths of a second, and like you can see, only 29 points ahead. Aston Martin ended up with Alpine when it should have been really at least 100 points clear of Alpine. We know the issues with Aston Martin. There's no point repeating them for the millionth time. Aston Martin, they've got the potential. They just need to deliver it. Next year, I don't think necessarily they will deliver it because I still think they've got fundamental issues there to fix that would be more important to try and fix in view to 2026 rather than to next year. But yeah, I think definitely this team, even though for a lot of the second half of the year they were poor, and obviously 5th place again, disappointing. Again, I still do believe there is a lot of potential in this car and in this team. It's just getting over the main big problems they have, and we'll see if they can do that. Alpine finished 6th in the championship for the second year running. 1 double podium finish, of course, they had in Brazil with Ocon and Gasly. 2025, of course, will be the final year with Renault engines. But yeah, a fantastic comeback for Alpine in those final 6 races. And they were probably the team that developed, I would say, the best over the course of the season, because they went from having the worst car probably on the grid in Bahrain, and by the end of the season had the fastest car in the midfield. That's very good. But of course, the car at the start of the year was so bad, there was no way you could get any worse than where they were, at the start of the year. So they were always going to improve, but the improvement they made was very, very good and sets them up, I think, next year. If Aston Martin once again are struggling, I don't see why Alpine can't take on Aston Martin and fight for 5th in the championship. I don't see why that is, say, impossible for Alpine. But it all depends on whether they do start the year at least as quick as they finished this year. If they do start the year next year with that same pace, then I think Alpine are in a very good position for next year, even if they've only got one driver really able to consistently score points for them. Of course, we'll have to see who ends up consistently as their second driver next season, whether it's Doohan or Colapinto. So, yeah, we'll see what happens on that front. But, yeah, great end to the season for Alpine, but of course, still not great. Finishing sixth in the championship when Aston Martin were there to be beaten if Alpine had started the year well, but they did not. And yeah, we'll see how they start next year. I mean, one thing we have to remember is they ended last season pretty well in terms of how quick they were. But then, of course, look how they started this season. So there's no guarantee that Alpine are just going to carry this form over. Theoretically, they should, but this is Alpine. They might end up starting the year with the worst car again. Who knows? Haas, though, who finished 7th in the championship, by the way, finishing inside Haas, the top 7 in the championship for the first time since 2018, where, of course, that year they finished in 5th. So, yeah, great year for the Haas team. Only 7 points behind Alpine in the end, and, of course, 0 podiums in 2024. But I I kind of feel sorry for Haas because I do kind of feel like they deserve or deserved to finish 6th more than Alpine did, because Haas did have a better car for most of the 2024 season. The problem is they didn't deliver enough points finishes in the car when it was better than the Alpine and was, say, one of the top 2 best midfield cars. That's the problem for why Haas ended up finishing in 7th. I mean, they were also very quick at the end of the season, not quite as good as Alpine, but yeah, they were very quick. But again, it was too little, too late for them to hang on to 6th place because they didn't really have that firm of a grip on 6th anyway. Ahead of Alpine and also Racing Bulls were at one point 6th in the championship as well. So very good car. Obviously, great turnaround from last season, where last season they finished last in the championship. But I do feel as though more was possible. Maybe a surprise podium could have been possible in one of these, wet races. Obviously, Brazil maybe could have been one. And then, what do you call it? Yeah, finishing 6th in the championship, I think definitely was on the cards, but they just didn't deliver as much as Alpine did in those final 6 races of the year. But Haas, I really hope, can just keep improving on what they've already got. Because if they can, there's no reason why next year they can't have another crack at, maybe 6th in the championship. Of course, next year, I think it is, they're starting their new technical partnership with Toyota instead of Ferrari. Going to be very interesting to see how that goes. It might be a possible way back into Formula One for Toyota. Who knows? But yeah, Haas, there's no reason why next year they can't be in the same position, consistently scoring points and fighting for the top couple positions in the Constructors' Championship, obviously in the midfield area, not in general. Racing Bulls, I'm very disappointed with Racing Bulls this year. 8th in the Constructors, had 3 different drivers in the car, of course, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and Lawson. 0 podiums, of course, for them as well. But the reason I'm disappointed is because coming into the year, most of us thought, especially with the way they ended last season, we thought coming into this year they would have, outside of the top 5, the best car. Say, the 6th best car at worst, and would be, the most likely team to finish, say, 6th in the Constructors' Championship. And I did think that they were maybe the best team to take the fight to Aston Martin for 5th in the championship as well. And at one point, it did look like that might be possible. I think after maybe it was at Canada where they had a really good result. It was, they were looking quite good then. But then mid-season, they just did not get the development of this car right. And that is what prevented them from finishing any higher than 8th. This car fundamentally was a good car, aerodynamically a very good car. Again, the problem was they just did not develop it well enough. They did not steadily upgrade it to the point where it would remain, pretty quick at all times of the season. And that's why in those final 6 races of the year, Alpine and Haas were quicker than them, because Alpine and Haas were regularly improving their car, fine tuning their car, when Racing Bulls just weren't quite doing that. So, yeah, it's really the development race is really where they lost out in 2024, and that's why they ended up finishing 8th, which again is disappointing. They should have been top 6 in the championship this year, but they just didn't. Again, did not get the development right. And I'm a bit worried about this team next year as well, because the lineup obviously is not confirmed for next year as to what it's going to be at Racing Bulls. We think it's going to be Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar. If Isaac Hadjar, though, is not good enough to score points on a regular basis, and Liam Lawson's in the Red Bull, then who on earth are they going to put in that second car if they need to replace Hadjar? Maybe Franco Colapinto, but Colapinto looks like he could be off to Alpine. So they might not be able to put him in that car by then. So I'm worried about this team next year. The reason I'm worried is because I fear that Tsunoda will be their only avenue of points finishes. And, Tsunoda, very good driver, but he's not at the elite level to the point where you can rely on him and not really need to worry about whoever the other driver is in your team. You still need to have 2 drivers who are able to score points on a regular basis. And I mean, Racing Bulls ended the season with a driver lineup like that, but next season it doesn't look like they're going to have that type of lineup. And with the way they ended the season in terms of the car they had, they weren't very quick either. So yeah, I'm not very confident about this team next year. Would not be surprised if they were, say, 9th in the championship next year. Would not be surprised by that at all. Williams, obviously a drop-off compared to last year, finishing 9th, 29 points behind Racing Bulls. Also had 3 different drivers in their car, which was Albon, Sargent, and Colapinto. Yeah, Williams, their car just wasn't as strong as last year, and I think the problem was last year in 2023, they had that main strength of having an unbelievably fast car in a straight line. They still had good pace down the straights this year, but they didn't have that strength as much. And it's because they went for a different type of design for this year that would make the car more, I guess, more aero-centered rather than centered around how slippery the car was in a straight line. And whilst at certain races that may have worked, overall, that did not work for the team. And it was, in hindsight, best if they had kept the design concept I think they had, which was built around the car being so unbelievably quick in a straight line. If they continued that, then I think Williams could have been maybe finishing 7th or even 6th in the championship, honestly, because it was such a strong area of their car last year that at certain races they were fighting with front-running cars. That's how quick they were at certain Grand Prix. But this year, I just, again, I don't think they got it quite right with the design concept of the Williams. Next year, though, they're going to have Carlos Sainz in the car alongside Alex Albon. Best driver lineup pairing I think it'll be in the midfield, and that is the best driver lineup Williams have had since at least the days of Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa. So Williams should be better next year. They should have two drivers able to score points next year, but I do think Williams need to start the year with a car that is immediately in the fight for points, because if they don't, then it might be a bit of a difficult season for Albon and Carlos. And finally, quickly, Sauber finishing last in the championship for the first time since 2017. Awful season for Sauber. Only 1 points finish, which was in Qatar, and only 4 points scored in 2024. And the reason they were so slow this year is, one, the two drivers were not good enough, but also the car was too draggy. And what I mean by that is they obviously have the Ferrari engine, the most powerful on the grid, but Sauber regularly would be like at the bottom or near the bottom of the speed traps until probably the final couple races of the year, where clearly they found a solution to that. And because their car was not getting the best out of that particular area of strength, they were hampering themselves basically to the point where they were not able to get anywhere near the top 10. And then, final couple races, they improved their car with some upgrades. Finally, I think, figured out what the problem was. But too little, too late for them to be able to compete for ninth in the championship or anything like that. But next year should theoretically have a better driver lineup. Nico Hulkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto, obviously the Formula 2 champion. We'll see how that goes. Again, it should theoretically be a stronger lineup next year in performance than the one we've seen this year for Sauber. But if the car is still as bad, there's not much Hulkenberg and Bortoleto are going to be able to do. So, fingers crossed, the car will not be quite as bad as what we saw this year. But let me go back to the main screen. There you go. And, let me, for a couple minutes, just read out some comments from you guys, because in a moment I am going to start playing my driver rankings video, which is 58 minutes long, if in case you're wondering. And it goes from 24th all the way to 1st. So considering I only want to be live really for another hour or maybe an hour at most, I'm not going to be too long here just going through these comments. By the way, make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the chat. Crystal Racing, who will drive for RB in 25? It probably be Tsunoda and Hadjar. If Perez does get dropped, I don't think Perez is going to go into the Racing Bulls car. There are still rumors that Perez might still stay at the might still stay at Red Bull, but I don't think that's gonna happen, to be honest. Say regards says the Red Bull enjoyed a better advantage at the start of the season than McLaren did at any point during the season. You guys act like Red Bull was as good as Williams. That's true, but that doesn't mean Red Bull had the best car this year. Just because they had their advantage was the biggest in those first few races doesn't mean they had the best car. If you go and look over the course of the 24 races, I think most people would agree McLaren's car was the best. But the reason they didn't win the Drivers' Championship is because the two drivers did not get the most out of the car anywhere near enough, like, say, Verstappen did with his Red Bull, or even Leclerc did with his Ferrari at times. Will F1 saying McLaren should have won both championships easily with a rocket ship of a car. Yeah, I think you could easily argue that. Emmanuel Gosso, is it? Says 25 will be Alpine running Mercs. Nope, that's not gonna be. That's not gonna be next year. Next year will be their final year with Renault power units, and then 2026 is where Alpine will be running Mercedes engines. Which, if Mercedes are indeed very strong with their power units in 2026, then Alpine are going to benefit from that quite a bit. And Sarah Gara saying he will stay at Red Bull Mexican money mates. Quite possibly, money does obviously matter a lot in Formula One and the world, of course, in general. But yeah, if you haven't smashed the like button yet, make sure to do so. As now we are going to move on to the driver rankings part of this stream. And like I said earlier, this driver rankings video will be uploaded on the channel later tonight. So if you're unable to watch all of it, don't worry. It will be uploaded on the channel later tonight as a separate video, so you guys can watch it then. And also, yeah, 58 minutes long. So it is quite long, but, you know, it's quite thorough. And I think that's what you guys want. One final thing before I get onto it is I just want to, again, do a quick channel update about, you know, the content coming up in the next or after, say, the Christmas and New Year period. So obviously, yeah, this stream today is, you know, is happening, and then that video, driver rankings video, will be uploaded. You know, will be uploaded after this stream later tonight, probably at like, I don't know, 7 or 8 p.m. UK time, something like that. Probably 8 p.m. I would imagine, because I need enough time to do the thumbnail. But then over Christmas and New Year, there won't be any content, obviously, because it's the holidays. But after we come back from the New Year, probably around the first week of January, there will start to be content on the channel again. Some recorded videos. I'm hoping to have a recorded video ready to upload on the channel around, say, the 6th or 7th of January. Don't know exactly what that video is going to be, but yeah, I'm hoping to have it again up on the channel around the 6th, 7th of January, something like that. Also, I will be doing another live stream before we get into preseason testing. I don't know if it will be in February or January yet. I would imagine it will be probably the earlier part of February, where I'm going to do early 2025 predictions, where, of course, we do predictions based on, well, not based on anything, really, just based on, really, I guess, what we've seen this year and just what we think is going to happen next year. That will probably happen, that stream, probably 2 to 3 weeks before testing begins. So, yeah, early February, most likely. But, yeah, after today and this stream and that rankings video later, like I said, over Christmas and New Year, there won't be any content. And then first week of January, there'll be a recorded video. And then hopefully through January, there'll be a few more recorded videos. Again, in terms of what exactly comes out, I don't know yet. Also, I'm also, you know, doing my university degree at the minute and doing a couple projects. So, you know, I have to also work on that. So I can't promise anything necessarily. But that is the plan going forward between now and, say, the first week of January. So, yeah. But like I said, let's get into this next part of the stream, which is the driver rankings. Now, one thing I am going to do quickly is just play it to see if you guys can hear it. Just want to make sure the sound's okay. Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the end of season content here in 2024. And in this video, we are going to... Right, so... Let me just go back. So, was the sound okay there, guys? Just put yes in the chat if the sound was okay. And if it was, then, yeah. Then I'll play it. And like I said, it is just under an hour long. And let me know as I go along in the driver rankings. what you think of my rankings, whether you agree or disagree, or you can wait until I upload the driver rankings video later and then comment on that video what your top 10 would be or what you think of my rankings. It's up to you, really. Right, sound is good. So yeah, I'll play this video, and once it's done, then I'll come back for a couple minutes right before we finish the stream to go through the results of the poll. Remember to keep voting that poll where I've asked you guys, what was the best race of the year? Was it Canada? Was it Silverstone? Was it Brazil? Or was it Baku? Let me know in that poll what you think the best race of 2024 was. And like I said, right before we end the stream, in just over an hour, we'll go through that the results of that. But yeah, for the next hour, let's go through my driver rankings for 2024 from 24th place to 1st. Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the end of season content here in 2024. And in this video, we are getting into the driver rankings for the 2024 Formula 1 season. Of course, I did do this at the mid-season point, but I decided to do this driver rankings for the season as a whole. Decided to do it as a separate video, separate from the live stream I'm going to be doing this Sunday, live at 1 PM UK time on the channel, where I'm going to be reviewing the season as a whole, looking at the teams and all the other stuff from 2024. So yeah, this video is purely going to be looking at or ranking all of the drivers that raced in 2024, and that will be from 24th all the way to 1st place. And of course, we'll be starting from 24th and going all the way up to 1st. And simply in this video, I'm going to go through each driver, explain why I've ranked them in the position I have, and then we'll go obviously all the way up to 1st place, and then I'll let you guys fight in the comment section over who should be where in the 24 order. So let's start off with 24th place, and 24th place has to be Jack Doohan, really, because we just don't really know what his performance could have been in 2024. Of course, he only did one race, the final race in Abu Dhabi, was miles off the pace of his teammate. Obviously, the Alpine car was very quick in that final race, so definitely there was a lot more pace there to be had if Doohan could have found it, but he wasn't able to. So that's why I've gone for him in 24th place, because only one race done and he didn't really do anything. So we can't really rank him any higher than 24th place. But going on to 23rd, we have a driver who did, just over half the season in the Williams, and then was sacked after the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort after a massive crash. And that was Logan Sargeant. Logan was very lucky to be on the grid for 2024, to be honest. 2023, he was miles behind Alex Albon, and I'm pretty sure the Williams team boss, James Vowles, was looking for a replacement for 2024, but just couldn't find one that, in his eyes, was clear, going to be an improvement on, Logan Sargeant. And then eventually he did find a driver in Franco Colapinto, who came in and did, I think, a really good job considering the circumstances and considering the pace of the Williams car in that part of the season. So, yeah, Logan, in 2024, just like 2023, miles behind his teammate, not just in the amount of times he was beaten in qualifying, but the lap time difference between the two was absolutely massive and could not be tolerated. So, yeah, Logan, 23rd in this list. 22nd is the Sauber driver, no longer, of Zhou Guanyu. A driver that I've never really thought was good enough to be in Formula 1. I just never really believed in the guy. Wasn't really that amazing in Formula 2. I'm not going to say he was bad. He had some good results here and there, but I just never believed that this guy was a good enough Formula 1 driver. And in his time in Formula 1, he proved exactly that. Now, the Sauber car this year was the worst car on the grid. There's no doubt about that. But the reason I've got it ranked, so low is because not only the amount of times was he out-qualified by Valtteri Bottas, but again, the lap time difference between the two. There would be several qualifying sessions where Zhou would be out-qualified by Bottas. Zhou would end up last a lot of the time and be way over half a second per lap slower. That cannot be tolerated at all. And that's why Zhou, thankfully, will not be on the grid next year and hopefully won't be on the grid at all in the future, because he is not good enough. If you are struggling to get anywhere near a past his prime Valtteri Bottas on lap time, you do not deserve to be in Formula 1. I'm sorry, you just don't. So, Zhou, 22nd in the list, and then 21st is teammate Valtteri Bottas. Again, the Sauber car was not good. The only reason I've got him ahead of Zhou is because he was better than Zhou factually in 2024. But even though the Sauber car was the worst on the grid, it wasn't, a 2019 Williams or anything like that. And there were opportunities where Bottas maybe could have, scraped a point during the season, but was just never able to, because Valtteri is way past his prime and is no longer at a good enough standard for Formula 1. So that's why I've got Valtteri Bottas so low. Both Sauber drivers, I think, were really quite poor during the season. And thankfully, Sauber have gone for a new driver lineup in 2025 of Nico Hülkenberg and the new Formula 2 champion, Gabriele Bortoleto. 20th place, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Now, as of recording this video, Perez has not been announced to have been dropped from Red Bull, so we'll see what happens with that. Maybe by the time this video comes out, he would have been dropped by the Red Bull team. But the reason I've got him so low in 20th place is because he ended up in a car that was regularly really able to fight for podiums and won still quite a few races in 2024. He only ended up with 152 points, which is nowhere near good enough for a driver of Sergio Perez's caliber, compared to the midfield, who, a lot of the midfield were, only 100 points behind Perez, which again cannot be tolerated because the Red Bull was so much faster than, say, the Alpine or the Haas or the Racing Bull or the Williams cars in 2024, that Perez should have been really 200 points clear at least of those cars or those drivers in the championship, but he only ended up 100 to 150 points clear. And the reason he was not that far clear, really, given the massive difference in car performance, is because Sergio Perez so many times, and especially the second half of the season, was struggling even to score points, never mind big points or anything like that. Of course, his really poor qualifying efforts also contribute to this ranking being so low. And yes, Sergio Perez, as much as I've loved him, I think he's had a great career. This last year and a half, he has been nowhere near the standard required and must be dropped by Red Bull. And maybe he'll come back into Formula 1 because he does have quite a lot of sponsorship money, that goes with him. But I would not be surprised if the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that took place about a week ago, wouldn't be surprised if that was his last Grand Prix in Formula 1. Perez is absolutely finished, I'm afraid. And yeah, qualifying, very, very poor. The races, very, very poor. Zero consistency. And started even making, towards the end of the season, some very poor mistakes. Go look at the Qatar Grand Prix, where he, at the start of the sprint race, seemingly was in another mental space, just didn't even bother to start from the pit lane, and Franco Colapinto behind him ended up overtaking him straight away out of the exit of the pit lane. So yeah, awful season by Perez, and he has got to go from Red Bull. 19th place, Lance Stroll. Now, the reason I've got Stroll ahead of Perez is purely because Stroll was closer to Alonso on performance this season than Perez was to Verstappen. Now, Alonso, of course, is not at the level of Verstappen. Alonso, I still think, is at a very good level, very high level, but Stroll was closer to Alonso on performance, and actually was closer to Alonso on performance this year compared to 2023. So that's why I've got Stroll ahead of Perez in 19th place, but still a poor season. If you go look at the championship standings, he was mixing it with, Ocon, behind Tsunoda in the championship, despite being in a faster car for probably most of the season. And that is just, you cannot tolerate something like that. And as I said in that video that did really well on my channel about this time last year, where I explained why Lance Stroll, I think, is finished in Formula 1, Lance Stroll is never going to be any more than what he is. He is always going to be bang average at best, have the odd great race where he magically turns into an elite level driver, but most of the time it's going to disappoint or just be bang average. And if Aston Martin in the future want to win a world championship, especially the constructors, they cannot do it with Lance Stroll in their car. No way at all. 18th place, a driver that did not complete the season, but had his chance, really, in 2024 to prove himself, Daniel Ricciardo. We were all very hopeful coming into the season that Ricciardo would get back to the levels he was at, say, in 2020 with Renault, where he was one of the best drivers on the grid. But it's clear that after that Renault season, he has been past his prime, clearly past his prime ever since. Did have the odd good session, the odd good race. Obviously, the sprint race in Miami, I think he finished in 4th place. The Canadian Grand Prix weekend was a great weekend where he, I think, qualified 5th and finished in, was it 7th or 8th place? Had some other decent results, but was beaten too regularly by Yuki Tsunoda. And if Ricciardo was going to get his way back into the Red Bull, he had to be beating Tsunoda most times than not, and that just wasn't the case. Ricciardo was not able to do that. Now, could Ricciardo be on the grid? Is Ricciardo still good enough to be one of the 20 best in Formula 1? On his day, yeah, but that's the problem with Daniel Ricciardo at the moment, and that's why Ricciardo is done in Formula 1, because he cannot consistently produce those good performances anymore, like he could back in the Renault days or, of course, the Red Bull days. That's just the simple reality with Daniel Ricciardo. He is clearly past his prime. I do hope that he goes on to have a good career elsewhere, say IndyCar or, something like that. I think he would, do well in America. But if he decides not to, and just have a chilled rest of his life, then no problem at all. He's had a great Formula 1 career. 17th place, I've gone Oliver Bearman. Now, obviously, Bearman only did, I think, 3 races it was, but in those 3 races, I saw enough from him, also considering just how young he is. You have to remember, in 2024, he's only been, 19? For how incredibly young he is to do what he did in, certain Grand Prix, obviously finishing in the top 10 for Haas in Baku was a fantastic result, and immediately being on the pace of his teammate, and I think may have out-qualified Hülkenberg in Baku. I'd have to go back and check, but and then obviously the first Grand Prix did in Formula 1 in Saudi Arabia for Ferrari, impressively finished in 7th place. Again, considering how young Bearman was at the time of making his debut and how inexperienced he is, to do what he did was super, super impressive. And I would say that what we saw from him in his only 3 races was more impressive, given the level of the car he was driving, than what Ricciardo, Stroll, or Perez or the rest did over the course of the season. So that's why I've got Oliver Bearman in 17th place. And just ahead of him is the driver he's replacing Bearman full-time for 2025. Can't wait to see Bearman in Formula 1 full-time. And the driver he's replacing, Kevin Magnussen, in 16th place. that Haas car was quick enough at most races to finish in the points, and Magnussen just did not finish in the points enough. Had the odd race where he was really good. Mexico was one race towards the end of the season where he was really strong, but those didn't happen enough. It was just too few and far between from Kevin Magnussen, and pretty much had the same season that he had in 2023, where again, had the odd race where he was in there, getting points for the team, but most of the time was just way away from where he should have been. And Magnussen obviously is now done in Formula 1. He's going to go and do, I think, is it GT racing for, was it BMW, I think I saw? Hopefully he does well in that. I know he's probably going to do something with his father in the future, maybe. I know he's talked about racing at Le Mans with his father. I don't know if they've already done that yet. If they haven't, then I hope they are able to do that at some point. But yeah, Magnussen, I think he's had a very good Formula 1 career considering the cars he's driven, the teams he's raced for. But unfortunately, like Sergio Perez, this last couple years has been past his prime, I'm afraid. And Magnussen definitely deserves to be off the grid for the foreseeable future. But yeah, Magnussen just not delivering enough in what was a pretty good midfield car in 2024. And just ahead of him, I've gone for what might be a surprise, but Liam Lawson in 15th place. Now, Lawson only did, how many races? I think 6 races, and it was the final 6 races of the season. But in those final 6 races, I saw enough to suggest that Liam Lawson was better performing than Magnussen over the course of 2024. Because Magnussen didn't really do that much over the season. And what Lawson did in those only 6 races, I think, was worth more than what Perez, Ricciardo, or Stroll did. The first Grand Prix back, he went from, 19th on the grid and ended up finishing in the top 10. Amazing result. Brazil was another one. Unbelievably tricky conditions, yet he finished in the top 10. And remember, that was the first time ever Lawson had raced around the Interlagos track. So to do it in those conditions and finish in the points, it just shows you how good this guy is. And maybe is Max Verstappen's teammate for 2025. If he is, good luck to him. But I think we've seen enough to suggest from Lawson that he was better than those drivers below him, and that he is definitely good enough to be in Formula 1. Now, whether he will be good enough for Red Bull, I honestly have no idea. I personally would have put Tsunoda in there, because I think Tsunoda, at the minute, is a better driver than Liam Lawson. Not by much, but just about. But that's the decision Red Bull have gone for. But as I said, good luck to Liam Lawson at Red Bull if that is where he's going. But if it's not, and he's at Racing Bulls, I think next year he'll do just fine, because that car should be decent enough for him to contend for points here and there, and probably over the course of the season will produce a few really good drives and have a decent season. So yeah, Lawson definitely good enough to be in Formula 1, and it's good to see that he's now going to be full-time on the grid, because really, in hindsight, he should have started the year at Racing Bulls alongside Tsunoda instead of Ricciardo, but Red Bull wanted to see if Ricciardo was good enough to come back for Red Bull, and ultimately he was not. Just ahead of Lawson, though, I've gone for, in 14th place, what might be quite a surprise to some people, Franco Colapinto. Yes, I was that impressed by Colapinto since he made his debut at Monza, that I have gone for him ahead of Lawson, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Stroll, Perez, Bottas, and the like. And the reason is because, one, how competitive he was with Albon in the races that he did. He was mixing it with Albon, something that Latifi and Sargent were nowhere near able to do. Obviously, scored points for the team in very tricky conditions in Baku, I remember. Also, the race in, was it Sao Paulo? Or there was another race. No, not Sao Paulo. A race in Austin. He came from quite far back on the grid like Lawson did to finish in the points. And really, up until that Las Vegas Grand Prix, Colapinto was just such a delight on the grid. One of the real surprise performers that everyone was really excited about. And then, yeah, after that crash in Vegas, definitely was shook up after that. Now, in terms of, his form after that, yeah, there was a drop-off, but I don't think that was necessarily down to him entirely. The Williams car did also get a bit worse in those final couple races of the year. But I would be interested to see how Colapinto would do over the course of a season against, say, an Albon as a teammate or a Pierre Gasly maybe. There is still rumours that Colapinto might be going to Alpine at some point next year. We'll have to see if that's true. But yeah, I was so impressed with what Franco Colapinto did in his only, what was it? Was it 8 races, I think it was? Or 9 races in Formula 1? Yeah, so impressed, and I cannot wait to see this guy back on the grid. And another thing that really does show his quality is a lot of the other drivers as well, even some of the top drivers, were very impressed by him in terms of him, coming in and immediately getting on the pace and mixing it and even beating Alex Albon at times. In what is not exactly an easy car to drive. The Williams was probably one of the slowest and most difficult cars to drive on the grid, yet did what he did nonetheless. So, yeah, congratulations to Colapinto, for producing the brilliant races he did, and hopefully we will see him back, and I think definitely we are going to see him back, whether it's with Alpine in 2025, or, of course, the 11th new entry to Formula 1, Cadillac F1, they're going to be called, I think, at the moment, for 2026. I think they very likely could put Colapinto in their car. So, yeah, I think we'll definitely see the guy back. But, yeah, what a few races he did for Williams. Now let's go on to a bit of the, let's say, the upper midfield drivers for 2024. Esteban Ocon in 13th. Now, I have to say with Ocon, it was pretty hard to tell just how good he was this season. Obviously, in the first half of the year, the Alpine car was pretty bad. Had some decent results here and there. Of course, had a really good result in Brazil, finishing in 2nd place. That, though, is almost entirely why he finished where he did in the championship, because he ended up with 23 points. 18 of them came in that single Grand Prix. So, yeah, it's difficult to say how good Ocon was exactly in the 2024 season. I know in the second half of the year, because Ocon, we all knew, was leaving, Alpine most probably gave Pierre Gasly more favourable parts to his car. Also, there was, Ocon, I think, maybe complained about the chassis not being quite the same as maybe Pierre Gasly's, or there being a problem with it. The thing is, though, is if Ocon had the same as what Gasly had for the second half of the year, we can't sit here and guarantee where he would have ended up. Would he have had a couple more points finishes? Probably, but would he have been ahead of Gasly every single race? We can't sit here and say that, because again, it's too much of an unknown. So, yeah, I think 13th for Ocon, ahead of all the drivers behind, is where really he should be. And let's hope that he'll get back to the form more so of last year and the year before, where he was probably just about one of the top 10 best drivers on the grid. Obviously, next year will be at Haas alongside Oliver Behrman. What a exciting driver lineup that is, and what could be a pretty good midfield car next year. In 12th place, Alexander Albon. Now, this wasn't quite as maybe impressive of a season as it was in 2023. Obviously, 2023, the Williams car was better. They finished higher in the championship. But Albon still produced many great performances, getting into Q3 quite often, considering how slow the Williams was. And yeah, many points finishes still, and was still able to be a regular contender, fighting the Haases, fighting the Aston Martins at times. I mean, you even saw in the final race, came pretty close to finishing the points, fighting an Aston Martin and a McLaren for it. Albon, yeah, once again having a very good season. Obviously destroyed Logan Sargent. Franco Colapinto he had a bit harder trouble with, but was still overall better than Colapinto, at least in qualifying. And yeah, he ended up still being the number one man at Williams. Of course, though, next year he will be teammates with Carlos Sainz, and next year is the real year for Albon where he needs to really be at his best, because if he can outperform Carlos Sainz next year and be clearly better than Sainz, then that might lead Albon to getting back into a Red Bull or a front-running car, because we know how good Carlos Sainz is. Carlos Sainz, probably one of the top, 5, 6 drivers on the grid this season, maybe you could argue. Or, definitely in the top 10. So, if Albon does beat him, clearly, next year, then that is going to raise Albon's stock quite a bit. Will actually be probably Albon's most important season if he beats Carlos Sainz, because obviously the Red Bull, when he was at Red Bull, got hammered by Verstappen, but since he came back into Formula 1 with Williams, hasn't exactly had the greatest teammates to really show just how good Albon really is. So, yeah, cannot wait to see how he compares to Carlos Sainz in 2025. And it's great for Williams to have such a strong driver lineup. In 11th place, might be a tad surprising for some people, but I'm going to go for Nico Hülkenberg. And the reason is because whilst he was consistently good in qualifying, had quite a few points finishes, especially towards the end of the season, if you go back and look at the results he had in the races, he just was not, in my view, in the points enough, especially considering how good the Haas car was over the course of the year. Haas really should have finished 6th in the championship, but they didn't. Alpine ended up getting ahead of them and finishing ahead of them by, I think, was it 6 points or something like that, or 7 points? Now, yeah, Alpine improved a lot in the second half of the year. Pierre Gasly produced some great performances that really did help Alpine's cause, but I do think Hülkenberg could have finished in the points more than he did, because there were quite a few races up until that last, say, third of the season where Hülkenberg, got some points finishes, but it just wasn't happening enough. So that is probably, I think, the biggest reason why I haven't got him quite in my top 10, because considering how good the car was, I think he should have been scoring points just a bit more than he was. But still a good season for Hülkenberg, obviously going to Sauber next year. I really hope that Sauber do give him a good enough car to at least fight for points on, certain occasions. He's still one of the best midfield drivers on the grid, despite being almost 40 years old. And, Hülkenberg still, I wouldn't say at his absolute peak of his powers, but he's not far from it, is Nico Hülkenberg. And, cannot wait to see what he can do for Sauber/Audi in the future if he keeps up this level of performance. But just about getting ahead of him in my top 10, in 10th place, Yuki Tsunoda. And the reason I've gone with Tsunoda is because if you look at the Drivers' Championship, Tsunoda only finished 11 points behind Hülkenberg, which I think is just more impressive than what Hülkenberg did, and I think shows that Tsunoda did have a better season than Hülkenberg, because the Racing Bulls car in 2024 most of the time was not as quick as the Haas car. So for him to be not that far behind in points, and if you go and look at some of the points finishes Tsunoda had, he had quite a few, 7th or 8th place finishes. I remember, late on in the season in Brazil, had a 7th there in very, tricky conditions. And I think Tsunoda was just about the better driver over Hülkenberg. Also, I think Tsunoda, for him to be consistently beating Ricciardo, and then when Lawson came in doing pretty much the same to him, at least in qualifying, I think does add stock to Tsunoda's quality as a driver as well. So yeah, I would just about put Tsunoda in 10th place, which I think is the first time ever I put Tsunoda in my top 10 for the end of season driver rankings. But it shows Tsunoda keeps getting better, and I would say, yeah, top 10 drivers of 2024. As I said earlier, I think Tsunoda should be in the Red Bull for next year, but it looks like they're going to go for Liam Lawson. Even if Tsunoda's at Racing Bulls though next year, he's still going to perform well and be one of the top midfield performers. But my hope is that Aston Martin will see sense and get rid of Lance Stroll and replace him with Yuki Tsunoda. Of course, Aston Martin will be powered by Honda from 2026 on. And I'm sure Honda would be keen on Tsunoda, given how good Tsunoda is and how well he's performing, plus has quite a big fan base back in Japan. So yeah, Tsunoda, really, I have high hopes for him for the future. He can definitely be a quality number 2 driver in a front-running team, no doubt about it. It's just, will a top team give him that opportunity? That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Just ahead of him, though, his good friend and ex-teammate, Pierre Gasly. I am going in 9th place. And the reason is because considering how bad the Alpine was, he still scored quite a few points mid-season for Alpine. But especially in these last quarter of the season, the last 6 or 7 races of the year, Pierre Gasly, yes, in an Alpine car that had improved, he was on absolute fire, scoring lots of points. He obviously had a 3rd place in Brazil, 5th in Qatar, was running so well in the final Grand Prix of the season, ended up finishing in P7. And because of his such great form in the final half of the season, was able just about to take 10th in the championship. So that's why I've got Pierre Gasly in 9th, because Alpine did not have a car that was as quick as the Haas car over the course of the season, or probably the Racing Bulls, you'd have to say as well, yet we're still able to finish in 10th in the championship. So that's why I've got Pierre Gasly in 9th. And with Pierre Gasly, I do want to touch on him just for a further moment, because I think last year I may have had him ranked in my top 10 as well. And I just want to make the point that at the minute, Pierre Gasly is performing probably at his peak. And I really hope that Alpine next year can give him basically the car he's had for the final, say, few races of this year. A car that's able to be in the points every Grand Prix. Because Gasly, when he's in the form he's in, in 2024, which again is basically his peak form, he's able to be in the points every single Grand Prix, when he's in that form. Obviously, qualifying, he's still super quick driver. We've seen that quite a lot over 2024. And Pierre Gasly is also another driver that, if given a chance, could be a quality number 2 driver in a top team. Of course, he was supposed to be that for Red Bull, back in 2019. But at the time, he just wasn't good enough. He wasn't the same Pierre Gasly that we see now. The Pierre Gasly of now is way better than the one in 2019. So, yeah, Pierre, another great season, especially in what's been a pretty hard car to drive, especially with it starting the year overweight, and there being quite a lot of problems with the car. Still, obviously, the issue of a lack of power from the engine as well, compared to the other manufacturers on the grid. So, yeah, Gasly, fantastic season, and that's why I've got him in 9th. Now, in 8th place, Fernando Alonso. It's pretty difficult for me to put him any higher because the Aston Martin for so much of the season was so far off the pace of the front runners. We can't really compare him to those front-running drivers. But the reason I don't have him any lower than 8th is because clearly, if you go and look at the season, he was so still consistently finishing in the points, and really is the reason Aston Martin finished 5th in the championship. That's why he was clearly better than any of the midfield drivers like Gasly, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, etc. So Alonso clearly has to be in 8th place, but you can't put him any higher really, because again, after those first 5 races, Aston Martin fell off a cliff of performance and were not able anymore to compete with Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari, so you couldn't really compare Alonso to those others. After the first 5 races, though, I'd say Alonso was probably one of the top 4 or 5 performers out of that front group of drivers. But again, when that drop off of performance happened, there was no way after that you could compare Fernando in terms of his performance level to Hamilton and Sainz and Norris and drivers like that. So yeah, Alonso's got to be in 8th place. Please, Aston Martin, give him a car that is actually going to be good over the course of a whole season, not just for the first 2 months of a season. That would be great. We'll see next year, but I don't really have high hopes in terms of Aston Martin in 2025. 2026, I have much higher hopes, but we'll see how that goes for Alonso and Aston Martin. But at least he's still performing at a very high level, so that if that car does become a very good car in the future and they can maintain it, then at least Alonso's still at a good enough level to deliver in that car. So yeah, good to see Fernando still performing at a very good level at the age of, I think, was it now 43, which is just incredible. And of course, next year is the 20-year anniversary of Fernando's first World Championship. That's just how old Fernando is. But let's get on to, I think, what you guys are most looking forward to is the front 7 and who I've ranked in what positions for the front 7. And we will start off, of course, with 7th place. And 7th place is the 7 times world champion, Lewis Hamilton. Now, I actually had Hamilton in my top 5 at the mid-season point ahead of Sainz and Piastri. But really, the reason I had him in my top 5 was because right before the summer break, he, of course, had 2 race wins and was in the races really starting to perform. Obviously, in Spain, he had a podium. Hungary, I think he had a podium, as well as those 2 wins at Silverstone and Spa. So, yeah, he was really starting to perform consistently in the races, which is why I had him up there. But the reason he's dropped to 7th for me overall for the season is because, 1, his qualifying he just did not fix and it got even worse in the second half of the year. And those race performances where he was able to still be right there with Russell, if not beating him, stopped. He wasn't able really to have that many great race performances. Yeah, the final race of his Mercedes career was great. Las Vegas, of course, was another one. But it was much less those really good race performances compared to, again, say, the month of June and July, where he was consistently putting in some good race performances, which at least made up for him being beaten by George Russell so convincingly. And yeah, the head-to-head is just really bad for any Lewis Hamilton fans or Lewis Hamilton himself to even look at. It is quite horrific, considering Lewis Hamilton is statistically the greatest qualifier of all time. But yeah, because of the really poor qualifying and just not enough good race performances, you can't put Lewis Hamilton for me any higher than 7th place. Maybe some people will put him maybe ahead of a Sainz or Piastri and still have him in their top 5, but I can't put him any higher than 7th because, again, way too poor in qualifying and not good enough regularly enough on the Sundays either. And one thing I will say is 2024, without doubt, was the worst season of Lewis Hamilton's career. Let's hope next year for Ferrari, obviously a massive change for him. Let's hope he gets back to his best, or even gets back to the level we saw him at in 2022 or 2023, where in those seasons he was still performing at a very high level. Maybe not his peak, but still at a very high level. Even that would be acceptable for, I think, Lewis Hamilton and Lewis Hamilton fans. So we'll see what Hamilton is able to do, of course, against Charles Leclerc in the same car. Going to be very interesting to see how that goes down next year and beyond. In 6th place, it was very hard to decide between 5th and 6th place, but 6th, just about, I have gone Oscar Piastri. Now, Piastri did improve this season. Obviously, his overtaking skill really shone in 2024. Had a couple very good race wins. Hungary, of course, he was very good. The win in Baku is still, for me, one of the best race wins of any driver in 2024. Because, the overtake he did on Leclerc, and to hold Leclerc off in what was, the McLaren was clearly slower than the Ferrari in that Grand Prix, was just incredible. Still to this day, can't believe he actually pulled it off. So, yeah, the highs were very high with Piastri, and had some good qualifying performances. Obviously, didn't get a pole position, unfortunately. But the reason I've got him 6th is because, as I've mentioned before, lack of consistency. And that is why Piastri is still not able to match his teammate Lando Norris, and is not able to be, I think, right up there consistently with your Verstappens, Leclercs, Russells, and even Landos right now, because he just doesn't have the consistency. Again, when he's at his best, his best is right up there with anyone's best, but it doesn't happen often enough. A good example was, Baku, amazing weekend and an amazing win, and then in Singapore, he was so slow compared to his teammate, and ended up, even though on the podium, he ended up, I think, was it over half a minute behind Lando, which is, that's over half a second per lap. He would have been losing on average, to Lando, which, you cannot accept that from, a driver compared to their teammate. And that did happen a bit too often, where Lando was up fighting in the top 2 or 3, and Oscar was maybe, fighting in 5th, 6th. And the Spanish Grand Prix was another great example of that, where Lando was finishing in 2nd. Wasn't far off Verstappen when Oscar finished, I think, in 7th place. But just lack of consistency. If he can improve on that consistency next year, I don't see why Oscar can't be one of the top, say, 3 or 4 drivers on the grid. But until he improves that consistency, then I don't see Oscar being able to be the number 1 driver at McLaren, and obviously that's going to be very hard for him then to be able to ever win a world championship. In terms of his race performances, I think there is a potential world champion in there. But again, it's the consistency which I think separates the absolute elite from the rest, and that's what Oscar has to find next year and beyond if he's going to be a world champion in that McLaren or in any car in the future. Just ahead of him, I went for Carlos Sainz in 5th place, and the reason I went for Sainz in 5th over Piastri is purely because of consistency, because Sainz was just a bit more consistent and consistently closer to Leclerc than Piastri was to Norris. That's the only reason I've got Carlos Sainz in 5th place. Carlos had a good year, no doubt about it, taking 2 race wins in Melbourne and Mexico. When he was at his best, again, same with Oscar, he was, his best was a very high level. But that high level was not produced enough to be right up there with, say, 1st, 2nd, 3rd in my driver rankings. So that's why I've got Sainz in 5th place. The reason Sainz and Piastri, I've got them so close but not in that top 4 group, is because of the... even though Sainz was more consistent than Oscar, I would say, Carlos still, similar to Oscar, wasn't able to match his teammate consistently. And that's what separates Carlos Sainz, I think, from being an elite level driver. I know there are plenty of people out there that love Carlos Sainz and think that Carlos is one of the best drivers on the grid. I disagree. I think this season was probably one of the best seasons he's ever had in Formula One. But yeah, Sainz did the best he could probably over the course of the season. Maybe, yeah, had a couple of races where he wasn't quite at it. But I think this type of season from Carlos is really the best you're going to get from him if he's in a front-running car. Of course, though, next year he is in the Williams. And it might be quite a while until he's in a front-running car again. May never be in a front-running car again. Who knows? Formula One works in mysterious ways. So we'll see what goes on with Carlos Sainz. But yeah, I'd put him ahead of Piastri purely because he was just a bit more consistent than Oscar and was, again, consistently closer to his teammate in Leclerc than Oscar was to Norris. And talking of Lando Norris, he is in 4th place for my rankings. Finished, of course, second in the championship, was Max Verstappen's closest competitor. But yeah, he did not deliver at all in that championship battle. Now, I have to say, he did prove in 2024 just how electric he is in qualifying. He is very, very fast over a qualifying lap, and that does help him quite a bit with the results he gets. But his performances on race day just are not good enough. He is not a good enough race day performer. That's why Max was able to still, a lot of the time, beat Lando, despite Lando having the faster car. Spain, you could say, was a race like that. Silverstone, Spa, maybe. The US Grand Prix in Austin was another one. There was plenty of races where Lando had a faster car but was still unable to beat Max for whatever reason, whether it was driver error or just, not making the right decisions maybe at the right time or just not performing well enough, simply. Lando just was not good enough on race day, and that's really why I've got him in 4th place. I can't put him any lower because, Carlos Sainz, whilst he was consistent, Lando was, I think, quite a bit better than Carlos in 2024, quite a bit faster, and I think did perform at that highest level a bit more than Carlos did. But I can't put Lando any higher because, again, on race day, he disappointed way too much, and that's why he didn't win the championship or even come close to winning the championship. And going forward into 2025 and beyond, if he's going to win a championship, he has got to improve on his race day performances when it comes to the starts, keeping clean through a race and not making any silly mistakes, being consistent. He has got to improve on that because, again, if he does not, then he is never going to win a championship, especially if he's in a car that is in, equal pairing to, say, a Red Bull or a Ferrari, because Lando cannot get away with those race performances if they don't improve drastically in the future. So yeah, Lando Norris have gone for in 4th place, and his compatriot George Russell lines up for me in 3rd. George Russell has had a fantastic season, absolutely battered Lewis Hamilton, as we've seen in the head-to-head. Not just in qualifying, the races as well, Russell has been the better driver. Not been a perfect season from Russell. There has been the odd race where Russell probably could have done better, but considering how tricky this Mercedes car was to drive in 2024, I think he did remarkably well, to get 2 race wins. Also produced, I still think, a great drive at Spa. Even though he did get disqualified, I still think it was a great drive, what he did there, to finish, at least on track in first. I mean, if you take away the advantage that he got from being, I think, underweight, he still probably would have ended up on the podium. So I still think it was a great drive there. But, many times finishing on the podium when he didn't really deserve to, because he was able to keep his car in the fight, keep his car, in and around where he needed to be. Also took probably more pole positions than you could have really hoped for, given how poor Mercedes were at times in 2024. Russell, of course, taking pole in Canada, Silverstone, Vegas, Qatar. That was 4 pole positions for Mercedes, and yeah, 4 more than probably Mercedes thought even possible this season. So yeah, George Russell, given how well he has beaten Lewis Hamilton and how consistently great he's been getting the best out of that Mercedes car, which again has been very hard to drive. I think Russell has done incredibly well this year. this year. And next year, of course, has got the challenge of Kimi Antonelli, the superstar young talent, as his teammate. If he can beat Antonelli well, and Antonelli does have a good season himself, then Russell is putting himself right where he wants to be in terms of his performances for the future. Because if he can consistently perform at the level that he's been at this year, then Russell absolutely can win a world championship in the future. He's definitely a potential world champion. He just needs to make sure he doesn't slip back into the form we saw back in 2023, where Russell that year was quite disappointing, I have to say. So, yeah, more years like this, and Russell absolutely will eventually get his chance at a championship. In second place, the Ferrari driver of Charles Leclerc. First half of the season wasn't necessarily amazing. He did have plenty of good races. Obviously, the win in Monaco, what a weekend that was. But it wasn't really until, I would say, a couple races before the summer break where Leclerc's season really came alive, where Ferrari in the races started to improve. And from then on, that helped Leclerc regularly, week in, week out, deliver top performances. Getting pole, of course, at Spa in, I think, what was wet conditions, and ending up on the podium, despite the Ferrari not being very quick. Also on the podium at Zandvoort, even though the Ferrari was nowhere near quick enough for the podium, he still pulled off an amazing drive there to finish ahead of the McLaren of Piastri. And then, of course, won Ferrari's home race at Monza with probably, in terms of, how the Ferrari car's pace was compared to the McLaren, it was probably an even better win than his win at Monza in 2019, where at least that weekend the Ferrari was probably overall the quickest car and was a bit quicker than the one Leclerc had in 2024. So for Leclerc to get that win on a very tricky one-stop strategy as well, just incredible what Leclerc achieved there. Baku really should have won that race, but he was outperformed by Piastri, who was on an even higher level than Leclerc. And then we had further great performances. In Austin, Leclerc absolutely pulverising the rest of the field. And Leclerc really, I think, in the second half of the season was probably the best driver in the second half of the season. But because in the first half of the year, he was a bit hit and miss, I would say, bit inconsistent at times. That's only the reason why I don't have Leclerc as my number one. But if you look at ever since the ground effect era came back in at the start of 2022, Charles Leclerc has been the closest driver to Max Verstappen, no doubt about it. If you look at these 3 seasons we've had now of the ground effect era, Leclerc, if he is given a good enough car on a regular basis to fight for pole and the race win, and of course then fight for the championship, I think he would give Max quite a bit of a tougher time for that championship than, say, Lando Norris would, and maybe even, tougher than, say, George Russell would. Leclerc is one of the best drivers on the grid, no doubt about it, and for me is definitely better than Lando Norris, Piastri, Sainz, and still, I would say, better than George Russell. And like I said, I think right now, based on what we've seen for the last 2 to 3 years, I think Leclerc is the closest driver on the grid to Max Verstappen. And again, as long as Ferrari can give him a car good enough to win the championship, there's no reason why he can't win it next year, even with Lewis Hamilton as his teammate. So please, Ferrari, give him that car, because it would be fantastic to see Leclerc versus Max for a championship in 2025 or beyond in general. And finally, of course, in first place, your 4 times world champion, Max Verstappen. Now, Verstappen did have his occasional dips at certain points, which wasn't necessarily down to him, but really the car. But the reason he won the championship was because he was the most consistent over the season. That's why he won the championship, because his form did not dip long enough for him to be beaten by Norris, or to be caught by Leclerc or whatever in the championship. Obviously, the first, say, half of the season, he looked still untouchable, even when the Red Bull car was not, say, necessarily the quickest anymore. Then, Red Bull had quite a big dip in form from, say, the Hungarian Grand Prix until the Singapore Grand Prix. But Max still was able to get key results, beating Norris at Spa despite having a grid penalty, finishing on the podium at Zandvoort despite the McLaren being way quicker, finishing second in Singapore despite the car probably not being good enough to finish on the podium. The Ferrari was probably even quicker than the Red Bull in clear air in Singapore, and the McLaren definitely was. So, in that tough time of the season, was still able to keep picking up those key results. And then when the car improved again, when we came back for the US Grand Prix Austin, Max was able to get a good enough load of results then to win the championship over his main rival, Lando Norris. And yeah, Max, clearly the best driver of 2024. Like I said, not just because of certain drives he provided in 2024, it's mainly the consistency over the entire season, and that is what separates him from everyone else, is that consistency. Leclerc, again, second half of the year, I'd say Leclerc was probably the best driver in that second half of the season, but he wasn't at that same level in the first half of the year. And again, that's what separates those two for 2024. Max was at that very high level the whole year. Leclerc wasn't. Russell, he was at a very high level for most of the season, but not quite enough. Lando Norris, of course, we know, wasn't consistently at that level. So Max Verstappen, that's what separates him from the rest, because he is the most consistent and able to deliver on that most elite level the most out of anyone. And that's what keeps him as the man to beat in Formula 1. And we will see in 2025 whether he can still be the man to beat in Formula 1. But guys, that's it. That's my driver rankings. I've given my explanations, I believe, to the best of my ability as to why I've gone for drivers from first place all the way down to 24th. Now, I want to hear from you guys in the comments section. Why do you think certain drivers should be in first or second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever position? If you want to, give me your top 10 in the comments, make sure to do so. But let me know in the comments section, most importantly, what areas of the field you maybe agree or disagree with me on with these driver rankings, and I will maybe respond. I will definitely have a look at your comments to see who's gone for who in what positions, just to get an understanding of where you guys think certain drivers deserve to be ranked for the 2024 season. So yeah, I'll definitely make sure to have a look at your comments. But remember, guys, I will be live on Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time to complete the rest of the season review for the 2024 Formula 1 season, where in that season review we'll go through the races and look at, say, the top 5 best races of the season, and also go through the teams and review how the teams did in 2024 and have a quick look at their prospects going into 2025. But that's it for my driver rankings video, guys. Again, comment below what your thoughts are for the driver rankings for 2024. And again, I'll have a look to see what you guys have to say. But until my live stream this Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time, and until my next recorded video, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye. And I'm back. And yeah, that is your driver rankings video for 2024. And as I said about an hour ago before that video played, that will be uploaded as its own video later tonight in about 3.5 hours from now at about 8 p.m. UK time. All I'm going to do is make a thumbnail for it, and then, yeah, I'll get it uploaded on the channel later. And yeah, if you weren't able to watch the whole video, the whole driver rankings part there, then like I said, it'll be uploaded later, and you can go watch it then and comment whether you agree or disagree with my list or what your top 10 would be. Let me know, obviously, in the comment section of that video. And yeah, I'll see what you guys have to say, essentially. But yeah, those are my driver rankings for the year. And I think, given the time it is, we are going to now come to the end of this stream. And one thing I am going to do before I come to the end of the stream is finish the poll in the chat where I asked you guys, what was the best race of 2024? 26 votes, and 50% of the vote has gone to the British Grand Prix. 26% for Sao Paulo and 11% for Canada and Baku, respectively. Yeah, I agree. Silverstone was, for me, the best Grand Prix of the year. Incredibly dramatic. I'm still gutted that I was ill and could not stream for that race. It was such a shame because that race was so good and would have been such a classic stream. But I'm sure we'll get more of them in 2025, a year that promises a lot. But Rux in chat saying new graphics look good. Maybe having 20th, 19th, 18th, etc. on the screen would have been even better. Maybe number and partition the timeline on the vid when it's uploaded. Yeah, I did consider having the number there, but I thought it was okay on its own. I mean, if I'd had each number associated with, each driver, I mean, yeah, it would have made it maybe slightly better, but I don't think it makes a massive difference. But yeah, I mean, it is something I could do in the future. Yeah, so maybe in the future I'll do that. Maybe change the graphic up and maybe just include the number with the name as well. But I hope you guys did enjoy the that video. But as I said, that's it for this Formula One season review for 2024. And this is your final live stream until early February. So, yeah, I won't be chatting to you guys live for another, probably 7 weeks it'll be. Obviously, pre-season testing is not that far away, to be honest. I know it seems far away, but it'll go by pretty quickly, especially if you're busy doing stuff in the next couple of months like I am with university and obviously making videos. So yeah, obviously, like I said, later tonight, that driver rankings video will be uploaded onto the channel. And then over the Christmas and New Year period, there won't be any content. But then hopefully during the first week of January, I will have a video up on the channel, a recorded video about a certain topic. I have probably a decent idea what it probably might be, the video. But obviously I'm not going to reveal quite yet what that video will be. So yeah, that's the plan of content going forward. And then hopefully during the month of January, I can upload a few videos, and obviously during February as well. That would be ideal. But thank you guys for all of the content, coming along for all the content this year, all the live streams, and also, most importantly, sticking by the channel despite the 6-week break I took from April until I think the end of May it was. Obviously, I made a video saying that I was burnt out with Formula One. If you remember the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, I made a video saying I was burnt out with F1 and I just couldn't. Not that I couldn't take it anymore, but I just lost the drive and the interest. And obviously, it came back once Formula One actually got interesting. And I just want to say, yeah, thank you guys for sticking by the channel, despite that break from the channel of, yeah, it was what, like 6 weeks without any content. So yeah, thank you guys very much for that. And I hope you guys will be around next year as well. But yeah, as usual, before you go, smash the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And don't forget to join our Discord server, link below in the description. Make sure to check out my last recorded video where I went into the Max Verstappen and George Russell War of Words. Link below in the description, a video that's done quite well. Make sure to go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. But, guys, until that driver rankings video of later, and until the first bit of content, hopefully during the first week of January in 2025, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.